What if your beginnings were humble, so humble that the world never expected your name to last even a generation? What if you were just a printer's apprentice, a riverboat worker, a wanderer with no clear direction? Could such a life create a voice that echoes across centuries? Could a man with calloused hands and little formal schooling become one of the most immortal storytellers in history? This is the story of Mark Twain, born Samuel Langhorne Clemens, a man who started with almost nothing, yet left behind words that became everything. Mark Twain was born in 1835 in a small town along the Mississippi River. His childhood wasn't filled with privilege or comfort. His father died when he was only 11, leaving the family in debt. Out of necessity, young Samuel left school and went to work. At age 12, he became a printer's apprentice. The work was grueling, but it gave him something no classroom ever could: access to words. Newspapers, books, scraps of literature passed through his ink-stained hands. He read voraciously, not because anyone demanded it, but because hunger for ideas filled the emptiness of his circumstances. While others saw a poor boy destined for obscurity, fate was quietly shaping him into an observer of life. As he grew older, Samuel wandered from job to job, typesetter, journalist, miner. But perhaps the most transformative chapter came when he became a riverboat pilot on the Mississippi River. Guiding steamboats through dangerous waters required patience, precision, and the ability to read currents and signs invisible to the untrained eye. It was here he took the pen name Mark Twain, a phrase river pilots used to measure safe water depth. The river taught him more than navigation. It taught him how to observe the moods of nature, the characters of people, the unpredictability of life. And those observations would later flow into the timeless humor and wisdom of his writing. Twain's journey was not one of straight success. He tried his hand at mining during the gold rush and failed miserably. He faced rejection, poverty, and uncertainty. But here lies the lesson. Instead of letting failure define him, he turned it into material. His restlessness, his setbacks, and the odd characters he met along the way all became the raw clay for his stories. By the time he published The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and later Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Twain had already lived 1,000 lives, and he poured all of them onto the page. Psychologists today describe Twain's transformation through the lens of experiential learning. Unlike traditional education, experiential learning argues that wisdom comes not from theory, but from living. Twain once famously quipped, "I have never let my schooling interfere with my education." Modern research in creativity supports this. Studies show that diverse life experiences, especially hardships, broaden perspective, sharpen empathy, and deepen storytelling ability. Twain's genius was not born in classrooms. It was carved by labor, loss, travel, and constant curiosity. If Twain's life were told as a parable, it would sound like this. A young man works with ink on paper, believing he is just copying the words of others. But slowly, the ink seeps into his soul, and he realizes he carries stories of his own. He sets out, wandering rivers and mountains, failing at many things. But everywhere he fails, he gathers characters, lessons, and truths. One day, he writes not just with ink, but with the very weight of his lived experience. And his words, once dismissed as humor, become mirrors where humanity sees itself. The boy who was expected to print other people's stories became the man who wrote stories that would outlive him. Twain's words still breathe today because they weren't polished to impress. They were carved to express. He wrote about freedom, hypocrisy, childhood wonder, racial injustice, and the absurdity of human pride. His Huckleberry Finn forced America to confront the ugliness of slavery. His humor mocked corruption and arrogance. His storytelling celebrated the common person, the workers, the dreamers, the wanderers. He turned ordinary lives into extraordinary lessons. And that is why generations still read him. Because in his stories, not everyone will be a writer. Not everyone will be a writer. Not everyone will publish books that change the world. But everyone has a story, and every life, no matter how humble, carries wisdom worth sharing. Twain teaches us that greatness does not demand privilege. It asks only this: pay attention. Observe life, reflect, and dare to tell your truth, even when the world dismisses it. Your failures, their chapters. Your odd jobs, their lessons. Your struggles, they're the ink with which you'll write the story only you can tell. Mark Twain showed us that you don't need to be born into greatness to leave behind something immortal. You only need the courage to live fully, observe deeply, and tell honestly. So here's my question for you. What story are you living right now that the world needs to hear? And are you willing to share it even if it feels small, messy, or unfinished? Because sometimes it's the stories born from ordinary lives that remind us of the extraordinary truth of being human. If this story spoke to you, tap LIKE so it reaches more people. Share it with someone who doubts their story matters. And don't forget to subscribe for more modern parable stories that awaken us. Stories that remind us that even from the humblest beginnings, we can create something timeless. Because maybe your struggles today are just the ink for the story tomorrow.